Hello, everybody, and welcome into this week's 30 Minutes program. This is going to be a program that we're just going to sit back and try to remember how things were, how things got to be as they are, and maybe how they plan to change. This is former State Representative Phillip Pinion. And Phillip, first off, you know, the thing about throwing papers, and I know you had the city route, which is what was the best route to have, because I think that's where you really got your start in politics, because you got to know everybody in town.
You know, Paul, there's not enough I can say about downtown Union City. Of course, the first one that comes to mind that influenced my life was Congressman Fats Everett. Fats would close his Washington office back in those days. Congress adjourned in April or May, and they'd come home. And Fats had just had the one office in Union City up there on 3rd Street, right below the courthouse. And I was his paper boy, and he got to know me, and I got to know him. And he found out my family was poor, and that we didn't have a whole lot, and that I was working and helping buy my clothes and everything else. And so Fats just kind of took me under his wing and let me work around the office there for him and run errands and sit in there when people would come to visit him. And, you know, you don't go see your congressman or your state rep or state senator unless you're wanting something, usually. And I watched, this was during the early days of Vietnam, and I watched a lot of things happen where people would come in and, you know, the father had died and the mother was left with 2 or 3 younger children, and her son was in the service, and Fats would get them out and get them back home working, helping provide for the family, and so many other things I watched him do. And I can remember I wasn't probably 8 or 9 years old, and I immediately realized this is what I would like to do someday, is be able to help people.
Well, let's kind of take this from a bigger picture. Most influential person then, was it Congressman Fats Everett?
Congressman Fats Everett was definitely probably the most influential person in my life, along with Mr. Walker Tanner, John Tanner's grandfather, started my first savings account, made me put $1 a week in the bank off of my paper route money. Mr. Robert Wood, that run the Schaenberg store when I was 12 years old, allowed me to open up a charging account at Schaenberg so that I could buy my clothes and pay $1 a week on. Mr. J. Walker Kerr was the president of Old and Third National Bank, and I was all of these fellas' paper boy, you know. And Mr. Kerr, I walked in with asking, Mr. Kerr, my paper house got too big to run on a bicycle. I need a motorcycle. And I said, Russell Abernathy's got this was 1965. I was 13 years old. I said, Russell Abernathy's got brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycles for $225. He went and carried me back to the personal loan, and that's where I first met Red Harrison. He said, Mr. Harrison, this is my friend Phillip Pinion, and he needs to borrow $225, and I'm standing with him. And I got my motorcycle. That was the first loan I had at the Old and Third Bank, which eventually became commercial, which I served on their board for 22 years, ironically.
To take that from a bigger perspective, most all of those people that we're talking about have passed away.
They all have passed away.
And then, of course, I think we have to reflect upon former Congressman Ed Jones, who I don't know that there was anybody any more versed of knowing West Tennessee than the late Congressman Ed Jones.
Ed, I didn't know Ed Jones until I got to Washington on his staff. When Fats died in January, Fats had planned on bringing me to Washington that summer and working up there for him. Well, Fats died, so I just naturally thought that my days of going to Washington might be over, because I didn't know Mr. Jones from down in Yorkville. Well, Mrs. Everett, Fats's mother, before she told Congressman Jones when he come to ask for endorsement, one of the stipulations was that you bring Phillip Pinion to Washington this summer when he gets out of school. So I'd been on Congressman Jones's payroll in Washington, D.C. for 3 days before I ever met him. And, of course, Congressman Jones and Miss Mary Lou became very, very dear to me. In fact, Congressman Jones is one of the ones who called me and said, Phillip, John's going to run for my seat, and it's time for you to think about running for John's seat. That was in, I guess, March or April of 1988. About March, I guess. And I said, Congressman, do you think I can do it? And he said, you're a young man. You've done well in business. I said, yeah, but are people going to vote for a preacher too? He said, I believe they will. And so Congressman, along with some of these others that were still alive then, Mr. Robert Woods, and convinced me that it was time to run to fulfill the dream that Fats had instilled within me when I was just a young boy working for him.
So let me take that step a little bit farther. When you decided to run for office, what was your platform? What was it that you told people when you were out?
That my family was here. I was a 6th-generation Pinion from Obion County, that I owned a business in Obion County. I preached at 3 little country churches in Obion County and Gibson County, and that everything I had and held near and dear, my boys were in the school system, was right here in the 77th district, which at that time was Obion Lake and part of Weakley. And I said, my youth, because in the legislative body, Paul, as you well know, you're not the boss the day you get elected. You're not the boss the day you take office. In fact, you sit on the back pew, as they would say. It's seniority. It takes seniority in a legislative body to build up to the point that you can hold chairmanships. It took me 8 to 10 years to get a chairmanship because everything is built on seniority. And I had the youth, and the gentleman running against me was a great man, fine man, Mr. Joel Shore. He had been principal. He had been superintendent of Obion County Schools, superintendent of Union City Schools, assistant commissioner of education in Nashville. He'd been gone from Obion County about 30 years at that time. And he was a fine man, very well qualified, probably qualification-wise better than me. But he had been gone, and he was 65 years old, and I was 35 years old. And we ran on the fact that the key to the future, to build seniority, you had to be a young man to do it, and I was. I had the education. I'd been to college, graduated from UT Martin, had my seminary over with, had spent a year and a half in law school. And the real thing, too, was I owned a wholesale food business. I called on every store in Obion and Lake and various counties. People knew me. They knew I had an education, but they also knew I was a hard worker. They liked to see me out there. I didn't send trucks out. I went out on the truck myself. For years, I didn't have any employees, just me. And people liked that, and I ran, and those are the people that actually went to work and got me elected. They owned the country stores and all the communities back then. And it was a fun time to run for office. I finally made up my mind, did a lot of praying. My old friend Danny Hall, who's passed away now, made me sit with him one night till midnight till we made the decision to run or not run. And we did, and as it turned out, very successful, and we've been very thankful to the people for putting their confidence in us for the 20 years that we served.
What did you get done in the legislature? What can you actually say the people from this district wanted this project to be led by you?
Other thing, I've been out of office almost 16 years now, so I'd have to go back a long way. The first thing that comes to my mind, well, at the time I got elected, the unemployment in Lake County was almost 25%. Had one of the highest, had the highest, I guess, unemployment in the state. And the state was looking to find a place to locate another prison. We already had the one down there that the people at first didn't like, but they'd come to like that prison and the jobs and the benefits and the state retirements, and they went with it. So I went to the governor, Ned McWhorter was governor, and he had a gas tax vote coming up that he wanted to pass, a 3-cent gas tax, which I wasn't going to vote for. I was a freshman legislator. I wasn't going to go up there and vote for a tax right off. But I made a deal with the governor that if I'd vote for his tax, the vote was pretty close at that time, that he would go ahead and locate that prison, a new prison in Lake County, 500 jobs at the time. And we needed that very badly. And today, I'm here to say the Department of Corrections is the number one employer in Lake County right now. And it gave me an opportunity to help a lot of people. We had some factories closing during the years after that, Real Foot, Brown Shoes, Slant and Slant. Put a lot of those people in there to work, and they were able to get a retirement out of it and had good benefits. Pay never was very good, much better today, for sure. But the pay never was very good, but the benefits were good. And a lot of people were able then to have retirements and health care they hadn't had before.
You and your wife raised 2 children, is that correct?
2 sons.
And you lost your wife at a period of time that...
Linda's been gone 19 years now. Yeah, she's been gone 19 years. Died January the 11th, 2005.
Your life changed a lot when you lost your spouse.
Yes, it did. It did.
And by the way, I got to tell you, I loved her. She was a great lady. Called the radio station many times. Yeah. Just made me feel like I was her brother. She
loved you, Paul. She loved the people of West Tennessee. She grew up in Nashville, but I brought her home to West Tennessee when we married, and she loved here. She taught school here. We were, of course, active in church. She played the piano at several churches that I pastored. She was a Sunday school teacher, and then, of course, was a school teacher in the Union City and Obion County school systems during the years. And she got sick, and just we went through some very, very rough times. In fact, one morning we were leaving to go to Vanderbilt. This was July the 3rd of 2001 to have her first major surgery. And we called you as we were coming down 45 or coming down 22 on our way to Nashville, and asked you to have the people that she wanted the people of the listening district to pray for her. And
this is a tough time when you're in the legislature. And Tandy Darby, who has an incredible amount of running up and down the highway right now, as all legislators are, particularly when you're in session. But is it hard being in the Tennessee legislature when you have small children?
It's very hard. Yes, it is. My boys were 9 and 11 when I got elected, and went to the legislature. And, of course, I'd leave on Monday morning and come back on Thursday afternoon. So I was only gone 3 nights a week, actually from home at that time.
But there are things you do when you're not in the legislature.
Oh, all the time, yeah. It quickly became what was supposed to be a part-time job over the years, when you become chairman of committees and you get on this and your own finance and your own oversight committees and so forth, I went every week. My last 10 years of the legislature, I was probably in Nashville, 50 weeks or 48 weeks out of the year. But it was very difficult. I can remember, of course, Chip was a good baseball player and a good basketball player. And I would come in. I stayed with my mother and daddy-in-law. Linda's mother and daddy's where I stayed to. I stayed with for the first 15 years I was in the legislature. And I would come in and call W&K, and they would hook me up by telephone where I could listen to the ball game. And I spent many a night listening to Chip play ball while I was on the telephone listening to it. And, of course, before I got elected to the legislature, I'd coached the Little Twisters basketball. I'd coached Little League baseball. I was very involved with my children and what they were doing and different things. And, that was the most difficult for me. But, every election that rolled around, of course, we had to run every 2 years. We would sit at our dinner table there at the house, and I'd ask Linda and I'd ask the boys, do you want me to run again? Or do you want me to come back home? What do you want me to do? And invariably, and I'm so thankful for this, the boys would say, Daddy, you help a lot of people. We want you to stay up there and keep helping the people.
If you just joined us, we're talking with Phillip Pinion. He's a former state representative here for West Tennessee, particularly in the backyard here of Obion and Weakley and Lake counties and so forth. Let me just jump into something. You got on the very important Transportation Committee, and everybody that drives from Martin to Union City, we'll just use those two right there, but they all are upset that we can't seem to get roads repaired here now. So what does it take to get something done besides having a Ned McWhorter, a Democrat at the time, in the governor's chair?
Well, of course, Ned, there's no way I can tell you the things that Ned did for West Tennessee, period.
When did you start calling him Ned?
I grew up with his boys, with Mike and Linda. Of course, there's a few years ahead of me, but I knew his children, Miss Betty, his wife. She and I worked together at the Union City Daily Messenger. So, I just felt like in public, I always called him governor. But when we were at the mansion, Ned, of course, was a widower, and he'd have the rural West Tennessee caucus out 2 or 3 times. We'd go usually once every week out there, and we would eat and sit around and tell war stories because, he didn't have a wife, and we were all away from our wives.
He was lonely without people in there.
He was, and all of us were away from our wives, so it just worked out. We'd go out there at least once a week and sit around. Out there, I'd call him Dad, and he kind of liked that. But any time in public or any time I was around him, it was always Governor McWhorter. Mm-hmm. But he was just Ned. He likes us to tell war stories, and one night we were sitting out there, and it came my turn, and I said, "Well, Governor," I said, when I got elected to the legislature, my daddy, who never finished high school and was a truck driver for Reelfoot Packing for 28 years, was here with me, and I wanted him on the floor with me when I got sworn in, because you know how close the governor was with his mother and father. And I said, we were standing there, and my dad leaned over my shoulder, and he said, "Son, I never thought I'd ever be in a place like this. With the House chamber is a beautiful place, been there since 1859. I told that story, and the governor said, "Phillip, that's what we do all this for," and wiped the tears out of his eyes as I was telling that story. And spent a lot of good times at the mansion when Ned McWhorter was governor, and of course, Miss Lucille died there upstairs in the mansion. In fact, after Ned had left governor and Sundquist was governor, we were out there together at an event at the mansion, and Ned and I, it was right after Linda died. And Ned was talking on how I was doing and blah, blah, blah. And he said, my mother died in the room right above us here. And I said, yes, sir. I remember when Miss Lucille died. I love the story that Mike tells when President Clinton and Hillary were spending the night at the mansion one night. And Mike and his wife were married, and they had a baby, first child. And Mike was walking him up and down the halls upstairs. The child was having trouble going to sleep. And the first lady came out and said, "Give me that baby." And Hillary walked him up and down the hallway. Walked the child, the baby girl, I believe it was, up and down the hallway there in the mansion. And he said, Mike was telling me one day, he said, that's special memories when the First Lady of the United States comes out and takes your child and gets her to sleep.
That's and these stories could go on, but let me change directions here for just a couple of moments. We were talking about roads a moment ago. You were chairman of the Transportation Committee that does see over how many thousands of miles do we have here?
I lost count now with all the new roads we've opened.
But there is something about roads that affects everybody, or at least it seems to.
Governor McWhorter always had a saying, roads plus education equal jobs. And we We needed our share of roads in West Tennessee. We didn't have them before Governor Recorder. And what Roy and Senator Roy Herron and myself and Milton Hamilton always tried to do was keep the roads that we had going. And of course, the project between 4-laning from here to the interstate now, which was complete during that time that we were in office, we were able to cut the ribbon on these roads. First part of them with Governor Recorder and the second part of them with Governor Sundquist. But, of course, we believed that we needed roads in West Tennessee, and I'm happy to say we had some very good roads. What bothers me today is how rough our roads have become. For years, Tennessee was rated #1 road in the nation. Truckers Magazine rated us that, and we held that for several years. And now, going up I-40 right now, you're fighting it till you cross the Tennessee River Bridge. The roads look much better, smooth out, and that's a little resentful that I feel from folks, because that's when you cross into leave West Tennessee in the middle. And every day when I come home or the weeks that I start back from Nashville, I think about that, because I know when I cross the river bridge, the roads are going to be terrible. Now, I've talked to a lot of my friends that are still up there and said, what is the problem? Number one, asphalt has become so expensive. Number two, the way they're blending the asphalt somehow, which is past federal regulations, is not always good for states like Tennessee, because, we have as you well know, we have a saying in Tennessee: if you don't like the weather, just stay around 2 or 3 days, because it's going to change. And we have a constant changing weather environment here. One day it's cold, we're wearing jackets today, tomorrow we'll be in short-sleeve shirts. And evidently the formula that they're using, they're putting a different kind of rock, and it's not as good as the rock that we used to use. There's been more of what they call the brown rock, and different things like that are causing the roads not to last the 10 years that they're supposed to last, that they used to last.
It's my understanding that the road between Martin and Union City, Highway 22, that the soil has a lot to do with the road.
That's a good point, and that's true. Our water table in this part of the state is very high. You can almost dig down 2 or 3 feet in some areas and hit water. Well, with that fluctuating and the amount of rain we get, it does cause the soil a little different. But the hope is when you build the roadbed, you have the rock that you put under the asphalt packed and such, whereas our rock here that we have, that most of our roads are built from, is not as good as the rock that they have in Middle Tennessee and East Tennessee, because it's mainly sandstone. It's stronger. They don't have the water that we have, the soil, where this Mississippi or Memphis Delta soil, I think they call it. That's why we had to build all the catch basins around Reelfoot Lake, because our soil was washing right off the farmers' fields into the lake and filling up Reelfoot Lake. Congressman Jones, Congressman Everett worked very, very hard, and Congressman Tanner, to get us the funds to build these reservoirs, which many of them now used to be lakes, are filled up with the sediment that used to go into Reelfoot Lake, and we've sort of been able to stop that, and where Reelfoot Lake is not decreasing in size as fast as it was in the 50s and 40s and so forth.
So the answer is, how do you get them fixed?
How do you get our roads fixed? Well, hopefully we can start getting some kind of rock that's a little better than what we have, change the aggregate, and as far as the weather, we can't change that.
If you've just joined us today, we're visiting with former State Representative Phillip Pinion. When you look back, the things have changed a little bit in the legislature through the years. First off, there is no Democratic majority, hasn't been in a while. It's all Republican majority. There are some really, really good people on both sides, and people that have a tremendous heart for being a servant, much like what you have been through the years. So why do you believe that the legislature went from blue to red?
National politics. The Democratic Party nationally became so liberal that the people that didn't represent the views of the people in West Tennessee or Tennessee anymore. And that's where Governor Sundquist did everything he could to get me to change from Democrat to Republican. And I never will forget the day I called him and told him I wasn't going to do it. I said, Governor, I'm like an old dog. You can kick me and not feed me, but at night I'm coming home. I said, the Democrats elected me, and I danced with them who sent me, and I'm staying where I'm at.
Well, many people thought that a lot of Democrats were really more conservative than the Democrats that we have today. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. We had the hats that we used to wear, Southern Democrat. The Blue Dogs that John was a part of in Washington was the more conservative. You take, for example, the Democrats of my time, Ned McWhorter, Roy Herron, Harold Holt, Milton Hamilton, we were pro-gun, we were pro-business. Now, we didn't believe you ought to be, these assault weapons, we couldn't see any reason for those, but we still supported man's right. Everybody and their brother had a rack in the back of their pickup truck with their shotguns in it.
Today, you're dealing with other things. You're dealing with homosexuality, gay agenda, LGBTQT or Q. I think I got it all there. But the bottom line is things are changing. We're talking about sending lots of dollars to private schools. I mean, I don't know all of that. If it hasn't happened, it likely will in the future. But there's a lot of things that have changed since you've left.
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of change. We never had to deal with the homosexual stuff or the LGBTQ, whatever that stuff is. That wasn't on the agenda of a legislature or laws at that time, you know. We focused on the things that were good for the people of our districts. That's what we wanted. Roads, good schools. I remember when we raised the beginning teachers paid $18,000. You know, $18,000 a year. They're making less than that back then. And we raised it to that. And then, of course, on up through the years that I was there. But those were the things that we focused on. And we had deep beliefs. You know, we were Christian people. And as far as homosexuality, we believe you was born a boy, you were a boy. If you were born a girl, you were a girl. This gender stuff wasn't around then. Sex changes and all that stuff wasn't around. And men playing in women's sports. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Technology has changed so much that cybersecurity and other issues and kids that are on, as a matter of fact, the legislature has been talking about this. Congress has been talking about it because it has had such an influence. We're talking about cell phones, if you will, or for that fact,
video games,
everything everything has changed in this period of time since you've been out.
We have a group that meets in Nashville about once every 5 weeks. We call the Has-Beens. We're the Has-Beens group. It's a group of former legislators, former DAs, former judges, and we all get together and usually have a meal, and we'll have a speaker, and it just amazes us to hear some of the things they're dealing with in the legislature today compared to what we dealt with 15 years ago.
Let me ask you to share with us, now that we've had some time between then and now, on a word about former Senator Roy Herron, one of your dearest friends, as I understood, and you were right in the middle of the time that he lost his life.
Yes, Paul. Roy and I became friends when we started UT Martin. In fact, Roy dated Linda before I did, and so Roy and Linda and I were always real close to Roy. And spent our time through UT Martin 4 years, and then I was gone for part of that time because I went in the service. And then when we came back, Roy and I kept our friendship. He was practicing law, and then in 1986 he got elected to the legislature, and we were so proud to have him up there. And he helped convince me to run in '88, and I got elected then. He sat behind me on the House floor, and we spent a lot of time together in Nashville. And then after I retired in 2008, of course, we remained close, and both of us he had a condo at the Breakers Marina, and I had my houseboat there and my pontoon boat. And we just, would go visit with each other, and just not as much as we did when we were in the legislature, but spent a lot of time together and remained very close. And I sold my houseboat, and he said, let's cut a deal. You keep your pontoon, and I'll use it when I need it, and you stay in the condo when you're up here, which wasn't all that much. And I said, okay. So we did that for a number of years, and it worked out good. Well, we would go in the spring when Ben, who's Roy's son, a medical student down at Emory University in Atlanta, Ben always brought some of his federal medical students up here around the 4th of July. And they would stay in the condo, and they would use my pontoon and the Sea-Doo and have a good time together, a break from their studies. This year they were third-year medical students when they came up. And so Roy and I went up on the 2nd of July and cleaned the pontoon up, got it ready to go, uncovered it, and got it ready to go. And then we worked there in the condo and got things taken care of there. And we went over to the Air Park Inn that night and ate dinner in the Air Park Inn. I hadn't been over there, so we went over there and ate. Came back and sat on the balcony there at the condo listening to the music from the Breakers and talking. And it was always about old times. Roy and I, like just two old retired politicians, spent a lot of time talking about the old days and different people that we had served with through the years. And Roy had kept a list and sent it to me. Over 500-something different people that we had served with at our terms in the legislature. So we just had a great time. Got up the next morning, on Saturday morning, fooled around there, sat around, drank coffee and talked, and had another visitor come up that was a PA and was going to borrow the pontoon the next weekend, and took him down, took him out, and brought it back and showed him how to drive it and everything. And it was about 11:30, I guess, then. I told Roy, I said, well, I'm going to head back to you. And he said, yeah, I'll stay a while. So I stayed till 12:30 when the kids started getting there. And I said, Roy, I'm heading. I'll stay and go out with us. I said, no, I'm going back to Union City. So I left, and then about 3 o'clock when they were out on the pontoon and the Sea-Doo is when the accident occurred. And when they got Roy off seat, he pulled him up into this pontoon boat. And, of course, a tremendous amount of blood and all that. And I saw the boat after that and had Rookie Edwards that runs the breakers. I said, get it cleaned up, and I'm putting it up for sale. And, in fact, I went this past weekend, went up to the breakers, went into the condo, which I didn't know how I was going to react when I first went in, but it was okay because they had moved the furniture around and she's got it for sale. And they kind of changed some things and then went and got my stuff that I had in the room that I stayed in. And also we kept the cover to the pontoon, the big cover for the pontoon. We kept it there and got everything out of the condo that was mine and locked it up. Sad day.
Regarding the late Representative Roy Herron, who was a senator who wanted to, at one point, to be governor or congressman, Roy continued to want to be very much of either a servant or had higher a step to serve this area. What do you think Roy Herron's legacy will be?
Roy Herron fought for the working man. Roy Herron fought for the man who goes to work every morning at 7 o'clock and gets off at 5. He fought that his child could have a good public education and a good secondary education or a good trade program to get into. Roy did so much, and he was so supportive of the Lake County Prison with me. He was supportive of the roads that we were able to get worked on and built, actually. For example, 840, which was very important to me because people going to Chattanooga had to go into Nashville, go down. Well, now you cut across. And it's worked out for me now. I have a condo, I have a townhouse in Murfreesboro, and because that's where my children, my grandchildren are. And it cut off 30 minutes of going to Murfreesboro from here. So Roy was involved in a lot of social issues and things that he felt important. Roy contributed a great deal to his 20-odd years in the state legislature of Tennessee.
Both of you, Roy Herron and Phillip Pinion, have served in the pulpit for a number of years.
Yes.
How hard is that? How hard was it?
Well, just this morning, it got brought up at the coffee shop. How did you deal with being a preacher and being a politician or being an elected official? I said, well, think about it like this. Just as a preacher, when people came to me, I could listen and maybe advise, but that was about it. When they came to me as state legislator and needed help, I could pick up the phone and call the commissioner of this department, the commissioner of that department, or the governor's office, and with John, you could always call the congressman's office. And I said, those are the things that really made it different for me. I loved both of them. I loved the 40 years I pastored. I loved the 20 years I served in the legislature because it was about helping people.
It's really interesting here, the group of state representatives and the governor. This area really, I don't want to say had it good, but it had a really big impact on things that got done here in West Tennessee. When you have John Tanner in Washington, you had Ned McWhorter at the governor's chair. You and the representative, Mark Maddox, a state representative. I mean, we could go around here for, we can go all the way down to, we used to call it what? The
West Tennessee Mafia. And we met every Tuesday morning in the speaker's office, even after the governor left, even after he wasn't speaker. We still met in the speaker's office every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock and discussed the issues of West Tennessee. They called us the Mafia because just about anything we wanted to get done in West Tennessee, we could get done. Because we were all on the finance, most of us were on the finance committee, which controlled the purse strings of the state. Yeah. And most all of us were chairman. Fitzhugh down in Lauderdale County was chairman of finance. I was on finance. I was chairman of transportation and also on corrections oversight.
And you had the Speaker of the House, Jimmy Nafee.
Jimmy Nafee from Covington, and Mark Maddox from Dresden, and we could go on, and we...
Of course, over Henry County, too.
Oh, Don, our good friend Don Ridgway. Last time I saw Don was at Roy's funeral, and then 4 weeks ago I was at Don's funeral. And we're losing a lot of them. But the West Tennessee group and the legislature knew it and resented it to some degree, the folks from East Tennessee and West Tennessee. And maybe we're having to pay for it now. I don't know. But we controlled the legislature for 40 years. John Wilder is lieutenant governor. I mean, we controlled the legislature and got the things that we needed in West Tennessee from our position, being in those positions.
Thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Paul. And let me say this to the people out there. The parties may have changed, but they're good people in the legislature today. I don't know Tandy Darby. I've never met him to my knowledge, but I hear so many good things about him. I do know Rusty Grills, and Rusty's a hard-working young man, and I'm very proud of them. And I don't know the state senator, Mr. Jackson from Huntington, but I want to say we've got some good people up there now working and doing the best they can to serve the people of West Tennessee.
Phillip Pinion, everybody. Thanks so much, former state representative from Obion County. This is Paul Tinkle, pre-recorded on this week's 30 Minutes program. Thanks for listening, everybody.